One thing that is huge is volunteer work. It's really unfortunate that that's kind of how the wildlife world has panned out, but you have to work for free to get the experience that you need in order to kind of make a name for yourself and move into these roles that are paid, that are full-time, year-round. It's really important to be able to put people that you've actually worked with down, who know your skills, who know what you're good at or need to work on. But really, it is all about the volunteer work. You just got to put your time in. Everyone does it.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Path Found. This is the podcast where we unpack the winding, messy, and meaningful journeys that lead to the work we love and a life that feels right. I'm Monica Argandonia, and each week I'm going to sit down with someone whose path didn't follow a straight line, but it still led them to purpose and fulfillment and often surprising success. These are real conversations about mentorship, pivots, networking, self-doubt, mistakes that we all make, and what it means to find direction when the map runs out. These stories are here to inspire and guide you. We'll dig into the things school didn't teach, like how to navigate career twists, life lessons, and big transitions. If you like what you hear, please share the podcast with a friend, subscribe, and leave us a review. You can also find us on Instagram at PathFound Podcast or online at KeystoneNetwork.org. There you can send in your comments, suggest guests or topics, or even apply to be a guest yourself. This podcast is for you, my students, my peers, and anyone figuring it out as they go. As a longtime teacher and anthropologist, I've always believed in the power of stories. They remind us we're not alone and that it's okay to change your mind, take a different route, or still be unsure of what comes next. This is my pivot too, and so I'm glad to have you on this journey with me. Now let's get started. Welcome back to Path Found, where we explore the winding, messy, and meaningful journeys that lead to the work we love. I'm your host, Monica Argandonia, and today's guest is Taylor Rabe, whose path has taken her from small-town Ohio and a declared nursing major to zookeeping in Texas to working with foster youth and ultimately to Yellowstone National Park. There, Taylor became a naturalist and through persistence and a bit of serendipity, landed her dream role with the Yellowstone Wolf Project. Her story is one of resilience, risk-taking, and redefining success, and it's proof that your journey doesn't have to be linear to be impactful. Let's dive in. First of all, I want to welcome you, Taylor, and thank you for joining me today. So I always start, what were you like in high school?
Yeah, in high school, I was super big into sports. So I played varsity basketball and varsity soccer. I grew up in a really small town right along Lake Erie in northeastern Ohio. So it was a pretty small school, but I was very heavily focused in the sport aspect of my high school career. I also was very good in school. So I took AP courses, trying to get partial college credit to get me into college, because I remember something that I really emphasize even now in my career when talking to younger generations is how frowned upon community college was when I was in high school. Like, you were seen as being someone who wasn't good enough to go to a four-year university. And it was just kind of a negative stigma surrounding that. And I wish that I could have told younger me in high school that going to community college was just the same as getting a four-year degree. You're just going to save a little bit of money until you can kind of figure out what you want to do. And so that's kind of where I was at in high school, trying to get into a four-year degree. I took the ACT 4 times. It was brutal. And it was rough.
Did you know what you wanted to do? Like, in high school, did you know, or would have community college helped you figure that out better?
Yeah, I loved animals growing up. I had always dreamed of studying and working with wildlife. However, anytime I mentioned that to anyone in my immediate family or friends or whatever, they just kind of laughed at me and told me that that really wasn't an option in making a living. So I really kind of forced myself into thinking that I wanted to be a nurse. And so going into college, that's what I declared my major as, nursing. People laughed at that too, because I really didn't love people. So it just didn't seem super fitting for me to go into nursing school. But the money, the pay that nurses made was appealing to me, and their work hours was appealing to me. And so, going into college, that is what my major was. And I don't know how now, as an almost 30-year-old, how they ever expected us at 17 years old to actually know what we wanted to do and to dive right into that. So I do wish that there were opportunities presented to me that could have helped me figure that out before I just kind of threw my life into the hands of, I guess, college loans, student loans.
Very few 17-year-olds know what they want to do. And congratulations to the ones who do. I definitely didn't. But so you stuck with nursing then the whole time you were in college? And
I did nursing for about 2 years. And then I just realized that I was absolutely miserable. It was not something that I was passionate about. And I really was just doing it to kind of fulfill this dream of being able to buy my own house one day or to make a living that I could support myself and my family. And so I did decide to switch over about my sophomore year of college, and I went into the zoology route. And even now, I did graduate with a bachelor's of zoology degree, but if I could go back, I wouldn't have gone that route. So growing up in Ohio, again, when I mentioned, okay, I'm going to switch my major, I want to study animals, basically the only two options given to me were veterinarian or zookeeper. And so that's the route that zoology would take you, pre-vet or into the zookeeping world. And I knew I didn't want to be a vet. And so I did go into the zookeeping route. And that is basically what I planned on doing after I graduated college.
so what would you have done? Knowing what you know now, what would you have done?
Knowing what I know now, I feel like a zoology degree really put me behind a lot of my peers and coworkers. I probably would have gone the route of like wildlife biology or conservation biology, conservation management, maybe forestry, fisheries, and wildlife. Just something that would have put me more into the fieldwork world and would have given me tools to have made me more successful at my job now. A big part of the work that I do involves like using some radio telemetry, and I didn't know how to use radio telemetry, but that's something that my coworkers learned during their undergrad. And so I feel like I was a few steps behind everyone else going the zoology route.
Did you even know those majors existed?
No. My husband, Jack, we went to college together at The Ohio State University. He was in the Department of Natural Resources, and I was more in the evolution, ecology kind of background. And so I did realize that we were going separate paths, but I also wasn't really understanding what he was trying to do. I guess I was under the impression that he wanted to be a professor at a college or university. I didn't really understand what it meant when he said that he was doing field work. That just wasn't something that I was familiar with. And I still think that a lot of universities, especially if they're not one that's out west, where they are dealing with large carnivores and a lot of different megafauna, they just really lack the ability to explain what some of these career paths look like going forward.
So when you graduated, then what did you do?
When I graduated, I immediately moved down to Austin, Texas, and I was going to begin my zookeeping career. Something that a lot of people didn't inform me on when kind of throwing me out into the world about zookeeping was, one, you make no money. You make no money in the wildlife field in general, but a lot of it is passion based. However, in the zoo world, they require a lot of high qualifications without a lot of things to back it up. And so when I was applying for jobs after graduation, I kept running into the same issue of needing 4 years paid experience to get a zookeeping job at an AZA accredited facility. I had about 3.5 to 4 years unpaid experience. That didn't count. And so when I was trying to find a job, I was really struggling to find one that was accredited and that was, an ethical zoo. And so I ended up falling into a small locally owned zoo in Texas that was accredited. It was not AZA. However, it was not appropriate. The zoo that I was working at, it was extremely unethical. We were doing things that I knew was wrong and partially illegal. And I had known this because I had worked at really incredible zoos. I had done some work at the Columbus Zoo, the Cleveland Zoo. I did a really incredible internship at the Audubon Species Survival Center in New Orleans. So I knew how a zoo should be run. And the zoo that I was working at in Texas just was not following correct protocol. There were days that we were feeding our big cats expired meat from Walmart and just things that I knew wasn't right. And so that really was becoming like a bit of an internal conflict for myself. And so I worked there for about 6 months before I just needed to kind of remove myself from the situation. It was not something that I was enjoying just because it felt morally gray. And so I pretty much packed up and I moved back to Ohio after that little zookeeping stint. Then I was pretty lost. I didn't really know what I was supposed to be doing. I just spent 4 years of my life trying to pursue and follow this dream and this passion. And it ended up being something that just really was bad for my mental health. And so I got back to Ohio, and the only job that I could get was working working as a juvenile corrections officer at our local detention center. And that was actually one of the most rewarding and incredible jobs I had ever done. I worked there for about a year, and it was something that I could truly see myself doing.
What made you even think to apply for that?
Yeah, I was really struggling because I just got my bachelor's degree, right? I'm a college graduate, and the only jobs that were really open in my area were like fast food jobs or working at the local grocery store. And there's no issue with that. However, I truly felt that I deserved to be making a little bit more than minimum wage at the time. And so that's why it kind of led me to even start looking into some of those things. I'm really passionate about like foster youth and troubled teens, kids just from underrepresented communities. And so that has always been a calling for me. And that's why I looked into it. Truly, I loved every aspect of it. And then, I really started to panic even more because by this point, my partner, Jack, he was already out in Yellowstone working for the Cougar Project here. And I knew I wasn't qualified for that. I had no business coming out here and doing the field work that he was doing. I wasn't in shape for it. I wasn't educated on the work that was being done here. And I was really starting to worry because I'd only been to Yellowstone a couple times, but he basically told me he would never leave Yellowstone. And, I hate to be that person who says I followed my partner, but I did because we were engaged. We had been together for 8 years. It wasn't just a whim. And so I just kind of literally threw myself to the wolves and moved out west. I quit my job as a juvenile corrections officer and I picked everything up, my 2 dogs, and I drove across the country to Montana. And when I was moving here, I had nothing lined up. I had a potential interview with Yellowstone Forever to work as one of their naturalists or seasonal guides, but I fully expected to be working at Subway in town until I could kind of get myself up and ready to, face the real world. And it was the very first day here in Gardner, Montana. Jack, my partner, had me meet some of his coworkers. We were at a birthday party and there was a gentleman there, Nathan Varley, who owns one of the most reputable guide companies in Yellowstone called Yellowstone Wolf Tracker. And he heard me talking to some people about how I had a potential interview with Yellowstone Forever to be hired on. And Nathan right there asked me if I wanted to work for him. And
wow.
Yeah, I truly, I've been here for about 6 years and I still owe everything that has happened to me career-wise, how I've grown, everything I owe to both Nathan and his wife, Linda, of Wolf Tracker, because they literally out on a whim just hired me. They had no idea what I could do. They didn't know me. And they really took a chance on me and they changed my life and the trajectory of my career and kind of what I do and the work that I do and why I'm so passionate about it is because of them.
Why do you think he offered you that job?
I think Jack, he very reputable. He's brilliant. People had worked closely with him. So I'm assuming they knew that I had a wildlife background. They knew Jack was reliable. And so I think that they were just taking a chance that I would be, as potentially as good as Jack. I'm very social and charismatic and I could talk to just about anyone. And so to be a naturalist, you have to have the ability to do that. However, it was one of the scariest things I'd ever done. I'd never dreamed of driving people around Yellowstone and giving them wildlife tours and having to interact and talk to strangers for 6+ hours a day. And so it was really, really scary. And it took me a really long time to actually feel comfortable in my skin and feel like I deserve to be doing that job.
Did you get training? Did they just throw you in?
We had a bit of training, but really out here, the training is just going into the field, going into the park and kind of absorbing things like a sponge, figuring out where animals like to travel, where they most frequent, different behavior patterns, different locations in the park where you might see a mountain goat versus a mountain lion or bison or wolves or whatever it is. So it really just required spending a lot of time and energy in the park and dedicating any amount of time that I had to being the best version that I could be in the guide setting. And so it took me a while, but I made a name for myself in the guiding world. I became one of the more popular requests for Wolf Tracker just because of my knowledge of the wolves and how much time I spent really watching the wolves. And that's when things really started to shift for me. And so while I was guiding in the park full time, I was also volunteering for the Yellowstone Wolf Project almost full time. And so I was really trying to learn as much as I could on the research side of things, while also learning things about ecotourism, education, and helping people get a chance to see wolves in the wild and other wildlife that they paid thousands of dollars to be here to see. And so, yeah, I really had a good time kind of getting to dive into both worlds. I never, ever, ever pictured myself doing research, ever. And even now, people ask me all the time, why wolves? And I tell them it's such a happenstance. Wolves would have never been a species that I would have chosen for myself. I love the ungulates. I would have picked, studied the bison, the elk, the moose. I would have never picked wolves. And so you can't help but fall in love with them. They're charismatic, they're spunky, they all have individual personalities. And so I truly have found a love for being in the outdoors and getting to spend time with them, whether it's on the job or just in my free time.
So how long did you do the naturalist job?
I worked as a naturalist for about 3.5 years. And while I was doing that, I was also taking a couple months off here and there to do the winter study, which is the big 30-day research period for the Wolf Project. So I was doing those research periods, but still guiding. And I remember it was in, early spring of 2022, Doug Smith, world-renowned wolf biologist for the park, he helped reintroduce the wolves in 1995. I had begged him to hire me. I really wanted to start working for the Wolf Project. I was having, again, this ethical dilemma within myself. My clients who I was guiding on my tours wanted to get up close and personal with the wolves. They wanted to have the opportunity to photograph these wolves. And I knew that was bad from when I was volunteering with the Wolf Project. A big goal of theirs is to help make sure wolves maintain that natural, healthy fear of people. We don't want them to get close to people. And so it was one day I was trying to get my clients close to see the wolves. And then the next day I was potentially hazing the wolves to make sure they stay away from people. And so it really was just this internal pool. And I needed to figure out where I really wanted to be in this space and in this ecosystem. And so I begged Doug Smith to hire me. And he basically said, no, we don't have any funding for you. Everything, all of our technicians here are privately funded. And we just do not have the money or the means to be able to bring you on full time. And of course I was heartbroken, but what do you do, right? If the money's not there, the money's not there. And so Rick McIntyre, he's big in the wolf world. He's one of my mentors. One day he came up to me in the end of February and he said, do you want to work for the Wolf Project? I'm like, yeah, of course I want to work for the Wolf Project. And he said, okay, I'm going to fund you with the set sales of my books. So he writes books on Yellowstone wolves. And he told me that he was going to fund my first year from the sales of his books with the help of Conservation Nation, which is an organization that really focuses on bringing underrepresented communities into the conservation world. And so each of them paid 50% of my salary for that very first year. And I'm extremely grateful for that because they really jump-started my career professionally with the Wolf Project and Yellowstone Forever. And so it was just really this full circle moment, right? 3 years prior, I was coming scared to do an interview with Yellowstone Forever, canceled the interview. And then 3 years later, here I am working for the Wolf Project and I am an employee of Yellowstone Forever. And so it just feels really good to be in this space after all of this time it took to get here. Something that I really try to do as in my role with the Wolf Project. So I work as a biological science technician. A big part of my job is education. And so I really make sure that I am giving back to communities, to undergraduate students, to people who might not have the opportunity to do what I do, where they come here and basically volunteer full time for 3 years. That's just not feasible for a majority of the population. You have bills to pay, you have student loans to pay. And so I do my very best to bring out as many volunteers as I can with me, because this is such a resume booster to say that you were able to go into the field, do some work, monitoring wolves, spending time in Yellowstone, studying large carnivores. And so I really prioritize a big part of my summer in bringing out volunteers, making sure they get these same opportunities that I had, with kind of out having to jump through all the hoops that I had to jump through to get here. So yeah, that's something that I'm really working on and have been working on for the last 3 years. So I've been full time now since March of 2022. So just almost 3 years now, almost 4 years, I guess. It's been a while.
Is your job it's still dependent on funding?
Yep. So 3 of the employees for the Wolf Project are a National Park Service. The rest of us are Yellowstone Forever employees paid through private donations.
So So you went from kind of shady zoo in Texas to a correctional facility and working with foster youth to taking a huge leap, moving to Yellowstone, not really knowing what even the possibilities were. What do you think? I mean, right, you get hired, you volunteered and worked that job. And what do you think was, if you were to advise other people? Obviously, the path is unique, but what was it? Like, was it the volunteering, persistence, putting yourself out there?
I think a little bit of all of it, right? But one thing that is huge is volunteer work. It's really unfortunate that that's kind of how the wildlife world has panned out, but you have to work for free to get the experience that you need in order to kind of make a name for yourself and move into these roles that are paid, that are full-time, year-round. A lot of the people that I work with here, they come and they volunteer. Maybe they'll do one of our research periods. And then when we are hiring or looking for people to bring back, the first people we're looking at are who are the people that volunteered with us, right? Who are the people that put in this effort to really kind of show us where their skills were, what they need to work on, show us that the effort's there, right? You don't have to be good at hiking. You don't have to be good at skiing, but if you're a hard worker, you have passion, we see you putting in the effort, that makes a really big difference. Also for me, I hate to say it, but a lot of the wildlife world too is not necessarily what you know, but who you know. So I do a ton of networking, a ton of connecting with other people. And that's one thing that I really emphasize to those who are volunteering with me is like, now you know me, right? And so I want people to be able to utilize me as a resource, use me as a reference, because it's really important to be able to put people that you've actually worked with down, who know your skills, who know what you're good at or need to work on, and just to be able to collaborate with them to be able to further your career. But really, it is all about the volunteer work. You just got to put your time in. Everyone does it. And something that I really emphasize to the undergrads, I know it sucks to volunteer on your summer break. You want to go home, you want to relax, school's tough, but there are people who are volunteering the entire summer, whether that's doing a seasonal job and you are getting paid something or doing work for free, but there are people doing those steps and that is going to put them above you, even if grades don't necessarily matter. Grades are important, but experience is going to trump education a lot of times. So you really do have to put in the effort and put in your time and pay your dues for the volunteer work and the seasonal positions to get something after graduation.
That's great advice. If you hadn't gotten the Wolf Project job, would you have just kept trying? What do you think would have happened?
Yeah, I think that if I hadn't gotten it, I probably would have kept guiding. I would have kept working as a naturalist. That job is really rewarding. I admire my colleagues and friends who still work in the guiding world. Education is so important. So they're doing a ton of the education, their boots on the ground, making sure people are getting to see these wild animals that are often, villainized in the media and people are scared of. And so just letting them see wild animals behaving naturally is super important. So I probably would have kept doing the guiding and continuing to volunteer with the Wolf Project on the side. I'm very fortunate that I was able to kind of move up in the way that I did. And so it's hard to imagine what life would have been like had I not. But I do think guiding would have been something that I kept going with for sure.
Can you just tell us a little bit what your work day looks like?
Yeah, it just really depends. Like in the summer months, I'm waking up around 3 a.m. every day. So there's no sleeping in on the job. But a big portion of my job includes doing things like monitoring radio collared wolves. So I'm tracking them via radio telemetry. I'm doing things like education. That's the most important part of the work that I do. So explaining to visitors why wolves are important to the ecosystem, how they benefit the landscape, just providing them with information about, wolf hunting behavior, predation, or just wolf behavior in general. We do research, obviously. That's a really big part of the Wolf Project and some of the stuff that we're pushing out. And then we do a bit of management too. So that includes things like making sure people stay that legal 100 yards distance from wolves or bears, and just making sure that our wolves stay safe when near the road corridors, so they're not hanging out in picnic areas or around campgrounds. Just making sure that this natural, healthy fear of people is maintained. So yeah, it just depends. A lot of my job includes hiking all over the backcountry, thousands of miles a year, depending on who you are. And so a lot of it's fun, but a lot of it is very public facing. I deal with the general public every single day, pretty much all year long. And that's the aspect of my job that I like, but some people don't like that portion, so they prefer to be in the backcountry. But it varies. But a lot of my job, I'm on the road, of course, corridor and just spending time with the public, helping them see wild wolves and getting to share the stuff I love with people who are here sometimes for the first time.
So what's next for you? You love your job, but what's next?
I love my job. It makes it really scary to figure out what's next. I just have a bachelor's degree. And so I am aware that in order to kind of move up a notch in my career, I do need to go back to school. So I am in the process of applying for a GRFP to get some funding for graduate school. I think I'm only going for my master's. I don't think I have the desire or the want to go for a PhD. But ideally for me, I'd like to teach at the collegiate level. I'm not sure what that looks like entirely. I think that I could be just as happy, if not happier, teaching high school biology. So it just really depends kind of where things put me. But that's kind of my next step. I think in the next 2 years or so, I'll probably be out of here. But it's really sad. You get a bit of FOMO. I love the wolves and I love getting to share this with people from all over the world. And I've felt very, very scared for the last few years at the thought of leaving this position. However, the wolves that I grew up with and that I started with in 2022, they're slowly dying out. And so there's not many of them left. And so it just feels like an omen, like they're done and it's my time to move on too. So I'm excited for whatever comes next.
So what advice would you give someone who wants to go into animals and conservation? That kid that you were that said, hey, I want to work with animals and do this. Knowing what you know now, what would you tell those as they go into high school and college? And
I think a huge thing that I always say is like just to follow your dreams. There are going to be a lot of people who tell you that you can't do this for a living, and that's just not true. Every single day for me is fun. It doesn't feel like work. This is strictly a love that I have for the natural world, and I have felt that love growing up. And so I think following your dreams, following your heart, but also not being picky on the study species that you work with. Everyone wants to work with the big, sexy carnivores. They want to study the wolves or the grizzly bears or the cougars, but everyone wants to do it. So the opportunities are small and it's extremely competitive. So if you are in your undergrad or just graduating and you keep an open mind and go in being like, I'll study birds, right? I'll study beavers or I'll study, whatever, bugs. You're still going to learn the same tools and techniques that everyone is learning for big carnivores, just on a smaller level, smaller scale. And so you're still gaining those tools and that knowledge. And now you're going to be desirable, right? Because these people who are so picky and they only want to work with wolves or bears, they haven't learned these skills anywhere else because they've been waiting to be able to do it with wolves or bears. But because you've learned that skill and you've gained that knowledge, you can slide right in. We're doing the same thing, just with a different species. So yeah, I think keeping an open mind on what you're working with.
And then I know you said about community college earlier, but looking back, what you know now, what would you go back and tell your 21-year-old self?
My 21-year-old self, I had just graduated college then. I think I would, I think it would have been important for me to just know that like there is a light at the end of the tunnel. I feel like I was in the trenches right after graduation and I felt lost and I didn't think that I was going to make it and I had made a big mistake going into this field. And now, 8 years later, I'm 29. I finally feel in a place where like I've made it, right? I'm working one of the coolest jobs in the country. Anyone would kill to be where I am, and I have made it. And so I love to be able to share that with people and just kind of encourage them and uplift them to kind of make it to the next level as well.
Yeah, your job, there's a lot of people who would love your job, students that I work with for sure, but it took a lot of hard work. I mean, you really put yourself out there. And I think it's great that you also want to give back and help others kind of get to that level too. So Taylor, thank you. I really appreciate this time. A lot of good information. And I wish you luck, especially if you're going to go on teaching. And that's a big shift.
Thank you. I appreciate being here. You have my contact information, so feel free to share that with anyone. I'm happy to chat and get people out here.
Where can we reach you on Instagram?
My Instagram is Taylor, Taylor, Rabe, Rabe. Yeah, feel free. Give me a follow, reach out. I'm happy to help anyone as best as I can while I'm still here.
All right, great. And you post some great pictures and videos. All right. Thank you so much for listening to Path Found. If anything we talked about today connected with you or gave you a new perspective, we'd love it if you subscribed, left a review, or shared the episode with someone you care about. You can also find us on Instagram at Path Found Podcast. To explore more stories, resources, and ways to get involved, visit KeystoneNetwork.org. This podcast is just one part of the journey. At Keystone Network, we're helping young people and anyone figuring it out as they go build meaningful futures one step at a time. A huge thank you to my podcast editor, David Strutt. You can find him on LinkedIn for helping bring these stories to life, and to Elizabeth Miner at Silvermine Creative for the beautiful artwork and web design. And if you're on your own path, navigating the unknown, making a pivot, or simply figuring it out as you go, just know you're not alone. The route may not be linear, but there's always a way forward. I'm Monica Argandonia, and I'll see you next time on Path Found.